always like to conclude, you know, it's 2012. It's kind of amazing to think that boards of elections couldn't pick up the telephone and contact people over what is a simple error. This is something that should easily be resolved. And I don't know about the rest of you, but there are times I get mail and I don't look at it. And most of it has to do with, you know, their bills, and it's easy just not to notice it. It's also easy for things to get delayed in the mail. So as we think about folks not correcting these ballots and these problems, these mean that their votes, in fact, won't count. And we want to make sure that voters check in with the Board of Elections. And then the other thing, you know, that notion of, like, there can be all sorts of kind of questions that voters have, you know, whether it's on election day or whether it's today. And they can call that number today. It's 866-OUR-VOTE. And on that note, I'm going to turn it over for questions for you all.
Catherine, could you give us a history here? Whenever we're talking about the corrective actions, the phone calls, is that something the counties were doing on their own? Was that in state law?
Yeah, this is something that they, in fact, were doing on their own. I'm going to hand it over to Camille to answer this.
Yes, I believe there was a Secretary of State Gresham had issued a directive that permitted boards of elections to use phone or email if those fields were available to contact voters. And so this is a departure from that policy in that boards of elections are now limited in how they can contact voters just by mail.
The Brunner was not a mandate, that was permissive?
It was a directive saying to contact, they were required to contact voters to identify errors if they found them.
They were required to do it?
Yes. Yes.
You know, and I would just like to add that in 2010 and 2011, boards called, and on the Secretary of State's website, it asks for the optional information on your email and your phone if there is an error to contact you. And I think what's confusing now is voters have provided that information and assume that, just like in the past, because I took the personal responsibility to provide the additional information if there was a mistake, that they're going to contact me. Now they're not going to do that anymore, and I think that's an important message that voters need to do something different to make sure their ballot is okay this year.
And was this a new Husted directive?
He just issued it 10 days ago.
What would somebody do to correct the absentee ballot? Would they have to just show up in person then to correct it, or?
Yes, they'd have to come down to the Board of Elections and correct it during the hours that the board is available. So if it's one of the weeks where it's only from 8 to 5, then the voters can have to find the time and availability to come down and correct that ballot while they're open.
But if they're not ever notified, they can't go down and do that. The procedures now do not allow them to even notify them to come down and do it.
Notify them by mail. Right. So that notion of, hey, what if it's lost in the mail? What if it's after the election? What if it's after that window?
The time period.
Because they basically have only 10 days to actually make that corrective action. Any other questions?
It was noted to say, sir, you said, let's stop the noise, let's stop the politics. Has there been, and there have been so many different issues from different directives, has there been any attempt to maybe sit down with the Secretary of State and have a discussion about this and really try to stop all this back and forth?
Our coalition has met with the Secretary of State a few times to try to talk through some of these issues. Obviously, this directive that we're speaking of currently just happened. I know the Cuyahoga Board of Elections, in fact, sent a letter expressing their outrage at this policy. We have not specifically spoken on this absentee policy, but we have tried to have dialogue with the Secretary of State in this election season.
What's the specific issue dealing with the disabled? I didn't really understand what the conflict was there. Is there something in the directives?
So no, this really has to do with, you know, that notion of Don coming and speaking with you all was that, well, who are the folks, you know, when we try to imagine the folks who want this weekend voting, who are they? Well, obviously you can imagine, you know, the mom who works, you know, 10 hours and has kids. I mean, you can all imagine that. But the other thing to think about is this notion of, okay, we want to, in fact, have a space just for folks who are serving our country right now. Well, what about the folks who served previously? What about the folks who face some disabilities and would rather have a family member help them? And they're most likely able to do that on the weekend. And so as we imagine, you know, the thing that happens is, you know, these directives come down, hey, you can only contact people by mail, and you think, well, mail works, you know, we've had good mail since the Pony Express.
Are there others as well you can point to that are part of the series?
Does anybody else want to take this? Okay. Well, one other thing. Sam will jump in. There we go.
I don't always think it's the substance. I think it's the symbolism. And what the symbolism says is that there's an effort to confuse people on this. My mother would have a difficult time with this. She would call me 1,000 times to make sure she's done right, because now she's heard all of this. This type of noise makes people not reticent to go to vote. They don't want to be caught in a ringer. Now, I know the Secretary of State didn't have anything to do with this, but in certain communities, there are billboards that are appearing that says it's a fraud to go to be elected. And there's a whole series of things happening to poor people, happening to people of color, and to add another layer of administration for those who are disabled, for those who are old, it makes people not want to go to vote. So it's the substance, but it's also the symbolism of it also. People are confused, and people don't want to be caught against the law, and they don't want to break rules. So that makes them, I'm not going to do anything. They are paralyzed as a result.
And I would like to highlight, as we think about, I'm sure you've heard about the right church, wrong pew. You know, that whole notion of continuing, the continued contesting that. Well, wait a second. If a voter actually gets him or herself to the polling location, well, how are they supposed to know which line? I mean, most of us don't go around in their heads. I'm 64C, by the way. I mean, remembering, hey, which exact precinct they're in. They get themselves to the right location, and they figure that the poll workers will help them through it. And we hate to think about, well, why would you even challenge this? It's hard to imagine what the benefit of this kind of restriction would be. And we were very surprised when the Secretary actually challenged it, when they made a decision and said, hey, if you get to the right polling location, the voter has done their job. They're not supposed to know all and know exactly their precinct. They've gotten themselves to the right location. So I think that's the first one. I think the second one, as we think about this fight over the weekends, just think about all of the things that you all accomplished during your weekends, all of the errands. And, we don't like to think of voting as an errand, but it's one more thing on the to-do list that needs to get done. And a lot of folks would use that weekend. When we think about, okay, well, you can vote by mail. Well, right, that's what the Secretary says. So, you can vote by mail. Well, wait a second. Why make it more difficult for the votes by mail to actually count? By putting out a directive that it has to be done by mail if there's an error. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's just, the problem is, it's a pattern. The problem is that it's a pattern. Now, once I say that, what we want, one of the messages I want to have is that voters can take this into their hands. They can contact the Board of Elections. They can call the hotline number and ask questions. That voting is such an essential thing, such, integral to our democracy, that we really encourage voters to be as responsible and as engaged as they possibly can. And to avoid, the silly pitfalls. Cross your T's, dot your I's, be a little anal. I was like, just, be really, really careful about these things. And on that note,
I haven't heard anybody mention anything about postage. Have you run into issues with that?
So I'm going to throw this to Gena, who immediately nodded on the postage.
Yeah, postage has become a question we get asked a lot. And I can't tell you the exact postage for every county simply because it can vary within the county because of local issues and the number of pages on a suburban ballot versus a city ballot. I know in Cuyahoga County, for example, ballots have different prices. So here's the message that voters need to take away. It's really important. With your mail ballot, there's a set of instructions, and that instruction, that sheet, please don't throw it away. Not only does it re-explain this, but it tells you how much postage you need to put on your envelope. And so it will be in there, and it will tell you. It's just really hard for us to track, since it can vary within counties. So it's a lot more than 88 postage amounts. So please read your instructions. It's very important. I know you think it's just another layer of bureaucracy. I understand how to vote. I fill in the bubble with my pencil, and I'm good. But your postage amount is on there, so find it.
Think about somebody that goes through all this anguish to make sure that they got it, and they don't seal the envelope, they just tuck it in, that ballot doesn't count. I mean, how ridiculous is that? Simply because they didn't seal the envelope and they tucked it in, that ballot doesn't count. I mean, just the symbolism of what this does to people inside their heads over the process of exercising their right, the insecurities that it creates for them, all these multiplicity of rules, and then we have it in Secretary of State extending it out to go to the Supreme Court. People don't know whether they're going to be able to vote the last 2 or 3 days. I mean, it's just too much noise, and people are not